Welcome in, everyone. This is our flow recap for the week of 8/11/2025 to 8/15/2025. This video is being recorded on Saturday. It's gonna be kind of a shorter video here. We have a lot of flow that's kind of still in limbo and can still be open, and we got kind of some put and some selling premium, so it's gonna be a little quicker video here. Kind of a mixed week of flow this week after last week's perfect week of flow. Just like anything else, you're not going to continuously be perfect, but we had kind of some pullbacks here on a lot of the flow, but the flow did give us a chance and actually came back positive on some of these. So let's kind of get started here, and I'm going to kind of make it a little quicker video here just because we kind of got a lot of some longer term flow in here too. So and just kind of a note for those in here, I think what I'm going to start doing is not recapping the Friday flow, or I'm going to carry that Friday flow over into the next week as well, because some of this flow on a Friday doesn't always move and you don't get a full good recap on it. So this up here will be recapped next week, as well as we'll kind of touch on it this week too. But let's get started here. And if you're tuning in for the first time, I do want to show everybody that all flows posted in real time here. I don't edit my posts or anything, so everything's posted real time with the average, premium, and all that here. And I am going to touch on something because I did have a YouTube comment from last week about a question on the premium. They were kind of asking about how come some of this premium is small. So if you're watching this again and you have that same question, essentially, like, I'm just going to touch on this quick here and get it out of the way. Like this only shows 2K, but the flow's a lot bigger. It's essentially here because I'm only saving, like when you come in here and click on here, when you come in here and save here, it'll just save that specific chain of flow there. So I kind of try to just grab one that has a little volume here, but like this one, you can see here's your 940K. So like if you just save this one, this is the one that's saved, it's only going to show 2K. But you can come in here and obviously see that full kind of premium here. So like that's 1.6 million versus where it's saved, it shows 2K. And that's just how it's saved in here. I don't save every single little chain on the thing. That would be very unnecessary and a lot of work. But all right, let's get started here. So first up, we had the 815 Dow 20.5 puts here. So we're going to go back to the 11th. So we're starting with Monday, the 11th. Let me pop this back to one day. We'll come look at the 11th. So now when we look at flow, there's always context clues you're looking for, like IV increasing, spot price increasing, all of that. Doesn't mean just because it has that, doesn't mean it's going to work in your favor. So let's take a peek at here. So here's our flow, how it came in. So when we look at this flow here, so you can see that IV spike and that spot fill coming in at the ask, just kind of coming up here. You can see that IV staying up, and you can see it small. You're still pretty much coming in right at the ask here, and you have an IV increase. So that flow reads as a buy. Now, just because it's at the ask, it doesn't always mean it's a buy. So, I mean, if you use these context clues, more so you're going to be right than wrong when you're trading flow. But obviously there's a lot going on this week as well with CPI, PPI, kind of hotter reports than expected. So that kind of can throw a wrench in some things too. But when we look at this, so that reads as a buy. You have your net put premium up. And then when we come over here, we'll come over to Tuesday, because we can see these did 47. They came up and hit 50. I mean, not a huge return, but slight green. I have them marked as a loss. I have a good chunk of these marked as a loss, and a lot of these did actually come back from being red to positive, but I'm just doing the closing price of the contract right now too. So, and otherwise we're going to be looking at the full range of the contract. So 50 here, I mean, so now this is what's interesting here. So you had 5,000 contracts come in there at the ask, come down here, you had another 5,000 come in here at 8. So this is telling me these were actually probably sells at the ask. So when you come down here, And this one's a little messy here too, because you have most of that volume carrying over into the 12th. So then you see your second ask side candle here, 5,000 contracts. So that whale closed those and passed those off to somebody else. It's kind of an odd situation there where it's hard to kind of read that one because you don't have that open interest change. So they didn't actually close that full position. If that whale would have closed that full position, you would have saw that open interest drop there. You don't get that drop in that open interest here. So that's, to me, that's telling me that somebody else got these contracts versus that whale specifically closing them. Little difficult to kind of read something like that, but that one would have been a loss. And again, I'm not following these whales fully. I mean, especially something that you know was a weekly expiration. They came in at 47. You're probably going to cut when you start getting down 15. What I like to tell people is if I'm scalping just flow that's coming in on the flow feed, I always have a set stop loss. I like 10-15%. That's just me. Obviously, it depends on the days to expiration. If it's a weekly, I'm gonna have a tighter stop on something like that, and I'm gonna have a tighter take profit on something like that. And if it's something that's 30-40 days out, I'm gonna be a little more lenient there and kind of let the flow try to play out a little bit. And this just comes down to you and what your risk management is and all that. And I always tell everybody have a risk management plan going into every trade, because sometimes the flow, I mean, like last week, 100% on the week, great flow. This week a little more mixed, so you will have that. And this is why I will still continue to do these videos even on these kind of down weeks, because it's called transparency and accountability. So you're just kind of coming back here versus some of these people that'll just post 1,000 trades on X and not even touch them or talk about them again. So I always say challenge the people that are posting the flow constantly to recap their flow, because it's probably not going to be the best. But Dow here, so that would be a loss here. I have them technically closing their contracts at 8, so that whale would have sold those at a 82% loss. So next we are going to go to Intel. So Intel was one of our good ones of the week, obviously. We had flow on the 8/29/22 call. We're going to come back here to Monday. So here's your flow whale entry. 4,000 contracts. It's 234,000 for this premium. Let's take a peek at the flow. Again, you can see, and if you've been watching my videos for a while, you usually see that the flow is always typically very consistent with each other. So IV spikes when that flow comes in, spots coming in at the ask, flow looks good, you're getting a lot of size and premium here. Come out here, so there's your entry. Looking back on 8/11 here, not all of that flow carried over, so kind of a lot of contracts changing hands within the day too. Obviously, Intel's more traded as well. So you see most of that here, and most of that volume sticking. So seeing some bid side action here though on Friday. I have to see how much carries over. Obviously some came off here from Thursday as well. Actually, that was Thursday where that bid side action was, so some coming off there. But these contracts running from that 58 and hitting a high of 380 here on Friday. That is a 555.17% gain, so that's a very good trade there. So FI, the 10/17/125 puts. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. There's still a lot of time on those 62 days. This is one where I kind of tell people, again, the longer days to expiration, you have to be a little more patient, and you can typically find a better entry. But we'll look at the flow here. Again, come down here, you can see small little drop in that IV here, but that's a lot of size and premium coming in there right at the ask. It's not necessarily part of this trade, so sometimes that's kind of where I'll overlook the IV, but you've got an ascending fill coming up here that IV drop there, and it's not a huge IV drop either, but keeping an eye on what happens there. And like this one kind of ran a little bit. You could have got about maybe 10% or so out of this one, but 313 ran up, hit 337. Actually, I think you hit 340 on a high for the day, so that 8% or so, but not good enough for me to take profits. I like to at least see 10% before I consider something a win. You can at least break even on 10% a little easier. But yeah, these ones kind of trading, I mean, just kind of choppy, and then closing at 195 here. So that whale's down 39% on these. Obviously, a lot of time on those. 9% out of the money. A lot can happen in 2 months. Up next, another good one. This was Meta. This one made a great move the next day. 4.5 million on these, coming in at 22.45. You can see your spike in the IV there. Flow not coming in right at the ask, but little wider spread there, so coming more towards the ask. That looked great there, and obviously played out good there. Had a gap up the next day. Hit our high here on the 12th of 37.40. That's 66.59% there. So good trade there. Dash, the 822.260 calls. Again, we're still on Monday here. So here's our whale entry here from Monday. Smaller whale here, so something I like to tell people is once you kind of get better at tracking whales, you can kind of target these smaller size premiums. Otherwise, if you're kind of newer to using unusual whales or anything, I always suggest kind of following the big chunks of volume, something that's like 2,000, 3,000 contracts, just so you can easily kind of math it out a little bit versus kind of like this where you kind of got to sit and do a little math. But 383,000 contracts here, 770 contracts here. These actually ran the next day, hitting a high of 865. That is a 76.53% return on those. Great trade. Seen a lot of contracts changing hands now. Hard to kind of tell what's still in and all that, but that's kind of why you look for the higher volume contracts. But if you've been doing it for a while, you can kind of track these a little easier. But our whale's probably out here, probably past contracts off somewhere, but good little winning trade there. So again, 490 to 865, giving us 76.53%. So now we're on to, we got a couple put sells here. I'm not going to spend too much time on those. It's obviously kind of a little different setup than seeing contracts run and all that, but I'll kind of touch on it a little bit here. So our whale here, obviously we had the on-ons. Let's see if it's going to let me. It's not going to cooperate with me. I'm going to have to pop it back here to the 12th. So we look at the 12th here. Here's our whale entry, 8,000 contracts, 448,000 in total premium. So now when you're selling premium, you want those contracts to decay. Keep that in mind. You want contracts to decay. So this whale has time. Essentially, you want those contracts to finish out of the money and finish at zero. So this is kind of why you don't get a full recap on them unless we can kind of see the whale buy it back. And obviously, 62 days, you're not going to probably see them buy them back yet. But these contracts still 6% out of the money. And when we look at that, you can see right when that flow comes in, you're coming in right at the bid. Nice IV drop. Reads as a sell. So now let me just pop this back out to Friday. So essentially, I mean, theta is your friend on these. Obviously, you're seeing a little movement. The contracts would be appreciating technically right now and not collecting the premium here. But contracts are trading at about 162. Obviously, that whale just wants them to expire and have theta slowly eat them away. So, little different setup. Usually people that are selling premium know what you're doing. I would not, if you see a bid side put like this doesn't always necessarily mean buy calls. Because this, when I say you're selling premium, like if you're selling calls, I always tell everybody it's bearish to neutral, because if that stock stayed the same, that whale's going to collect the premium. And again, essentially the same for puts, where you are selling that put, you are bullish to neutral on that. That stock can stay neutral and you can collect your premium. And obviously we had a kind of nice little move here. Looks like kind of closed a little bit at 162 there Friday. So whales probably gonna be watching these closely. So COP, these ones made a good move here too. Our whale right here, 126,000 in premium, making a good move up here. We actually hit 144 the next day on the 13th, giving us a 69.41% return there. Good move there. Kind of looks like that whale's still in here too. Yeah, your whale's still in, and they're trading at 81, so interesting to see what happens. So UAL now. And this one, again, you're 34 days out. You have some time on these. UAL had a huge run up this week. It had a 9% day back on Tuesday. Yeah, it was Tuesday, and then we had this put flow come in, obviously. So again, a little longer time here, 3% out of the money. Whales trading at 375. Obviously, they came in at 5 here. Hit 525 a couple times on the same day. Not a huge return. I mean, 5%. Nothing big there, but slowly kind of just coming down here. Got to see what happens. Got a lot of put premium here on Friday, but see what happens here. And it looks like our whale's still in for the most part, but contracts trading down about 25% there, trading at 375. So another one. So we have the 1017 core weave 70 puts. Again, these are 30% out of the money right now. So when you're selling premium, you want these to expire out of the money essentially. Otherwise, if they come back at 70, you're going to be buying those back at $70 a share. But just kind of looking at that flow here, I mean, you can see right when that big chunk of flow and volume come in, IV drops. You're coming in pretty much right at the bid. I mean, obviously everybody wanted puts on the day because it just had earnings. So that's why that bid ask is a little wider, but this whale coming in, selling them at 1 for 105 there. And again, the whale's just looking for the contracts to slowly decay here and collect their premium. So again, 62 days out, 30% out of the money. More than likely, you're not going to see it drop another 30% by then. And this is just where kind of time in the market and all that comes, but not a super good move so far on those. But obviously earnings kind of, you see a lot of volatility around that time. So see what happens to these in the future. Shop, this one was an interesting one because here was our entry here, 348. They slowly came in here and they came up and hit 390. Actually, we hit 4 for a high on the day. And I consider and again, if you're just tuning in for the first time, I'm looking for at least a minimum of 10-15% return. If you're up 10% on a trade, you should still have a stop on it, at least at break even, because you can always get those profits and recycle them. If you continuously, if you're up 10%, have it on break even, you're not going to lose money at least. And if you're up 15%, set it up at like 5%. Obviously, there's trailing stops and all that. Not diving super deep into those videos on how to set all that stuff up, but again, you see a 12%, 10% trade, that's a good return. It's a good return. You should be taking some profits, and you can always adjust up and just slowly size out your contracts as well. But our shot flow here, there was a lot of shot flow that came in here. And let's go find where it came in. And again, reading as a buy, flow coming in right at the ask, IV spikes, just following all the way up. IV continues to rise, spot continues to increase. And a little drop here, but again, overall your IV's increasing. So we're going to come back to the 13th here, actually make it a little easier to read. So flow coming in here, 355 was our entry, so about that, one of these two candles here that fill obviously a little wider, so 355. And you have a lot of time here, so you could pop up the 361 here, kind of chop, and then over from 9:10 Central, I'm Central Time, all the way up to 9:35, about 25 minutes. You have enough time, you can see those contracts starting to kind of climb up, and can always, I mean, you hit these hits, so 355 up to that high of 4 there. That's 12%. I have a stop on it, at least on break even, especially when I see these contracts starting to kind of maybe come down a little bit here. You secure 5-10% on trades, that's still a good return. So those the 355 to 4, that's a 12% return again. And I want to pop this out to Friday because this whale, actually if you come, 3, so again, most of that volume carrying over, then you see some big chunks of volume here, and then that drop in that IV. So it looks like that whale probably ended up cutting there. So again, some of these whales, again, they're humans. They're not always going to be at 100%. This isn't a video game, so this is real life. People are making decisions, and they can be wrong, just like everybody else. So the shop, you would have got a 12.68% trade out of that. So these next ones, so BE here. So really interesting one here because obviously there's still a little time on these. Here was your entry, 210. Contracts dropped all the way down here. Came up. They actually turned positive yesterday on the day. They hit 215. So you could have got out at least at break even or so. And then you have that kind of drop here into close. So those contracts closed down 36% with a week to go. But they came back very quick here on Friday. All right. Carvana. So this one, pretty messy now. Hard to kind of know what's fully in it still. But this was our whale right here. Had 3,000 contracts at 680 for about 2 million, a little over. You can see a lot of that volume, about half of it carrying over, and then just seeing kind of some ads here at the bid actually. So lots of ads at the bid because you can see a lot of that volume kind of, or about half of that carrying over. So see, this is something where it starts to get a little messy and hard to read, but at least coming back up and actually hitting 572 here on the 14th and kind of making a little comeback here. Obviously 3% out of the money with a week to go. Don't know who's still in something like this. This is getting messy, so kind of pass on those ones now. But that would have been a loss there. So that whale, if they are still truly in, they're down 29% on those. So CRM now. This one we're going to come back to the 14th. So again, good move on these intraday. Here's our whale entry, 681 contracts, 198. Small little dip here down to about 180, and then came back up and hit 235 here on the day. You can see that there. It's a 18.69% gain. Good little trade there. Should be having profit or stops on, especially knowing that their weeklies and theta's more aggressive. But when we come here and look at Thursday into Friday, obviously you can see that little drop into Friday. So that's the impact of theta there. And now we move on to SPY. So the 8/19/634 puts, this could have been kind of a bet on the Putin-Trump summit, all that. But, well, here, all the contracts are still in. You're only 1% out of the money, so keep that in mind. 54, these came back up, almost back to break even, and then they closed at 40 here. So that those contracts closing down 27% there. And now if you come here and we look at RGTI, again, a little more time on something like this, 13 days, 2 weeks, and anything quantum, if you've traded quantum computing, you can see some massive swings in these, but contracts here, 128, closing at about 59 here, that whale's down 53%. Then we had a core weave for next week. Again, this is kind of why on the Friday flow I'm going to kind of swing it into the next week. So next week we'll recap the flow from here. So coming in here, 397, 4 was the entry I have marked here. Came down, almost kind of came back up. Actually, and it's funny too, this is the impacts of kind of IV as well too. So you can see core we've actually came up and made a new high on the day, but contracts, that IV kind of starts to drop. And when you look at this IV here as well, you can see that IV is pretty high on something like this, but you can see that big spike in that IV again coming in at the ask. So your flow is textbook, but we'll have to see what happens with this. Again, expires next week. Could see a big run on Monday, who knows. Lift, these made a nice intraday move here. 55, again, IV spikes. Coming in the ask, looks good there. A lot of net call premium. Those hitting a high of 95 on the day from 55, that's 72.73%. When we look at MU here, pretty much sitting break even, 20 days on those, 131,000 in premium. Closing at about that 255, so that whale's down 3%. And GTLB, the 9546 calls. Good move on these so far. Obviously, some more time on those. 2 came up and hit a high of 290. That's 45% return on those intraday. Closing at 272, so whale's still in, it looks like. But yeah, little, again, you're going to always have that from week to week. You're going to have a stellar week. You might have kind of a choppier week here. Obviously, a lot of data on the week too, but yeah, that's kind of all I got for this week. We'll be back at it next week. Try to improve on something. I'd still say it's a good week. Your wins should be outweighing the losses, but have a great weekend, everyone.